I always feel like conversations outside of the therapy room are polite. People aren't really
Yeah.
telling you how they really
Yeah.
feel. And the beauty
Yes.
about therapy is I get to meet all of a person. And that's just amazing, right? And so, what I love is finding aliveness. And aliveness doesn't just mean happy and joyful, it could be sad, it could be angry, it could be
Just alive.
anxious. And look, I have permission to invite people to be all those parts of themselves as a therapist. But of course, at a cocktail party, I don't have permission to, hey, no, come on, tell me how you're really feeling. And play with someone in reality, not in the kind of little facade that they are and I'm putting on. But by the way, a
Mm.
little analogy I came up with, therapists are like vampires. And I don't know if you're familiar with the vampire mythology, is we have to be invited in.
Welcome to Super Entrepreneurs Podcast. I'm your host, Shahid Durrani. Today we have with us Figs O'Sullivan. Figs is a licensed marriage and family therapist, certified in emotionally focused therapy, and the founder of Empathy. Figs is a passionate entrepreneur driven to change lives for the better. Welcome to our show, Figs.
Thank you, Shahid, for having me on. Great to be here.
It's my pleasure. That's a cool name, Figs, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's good. I know it's a short form, though.
Yeah, exactly. I've been called
Yeah.
Fig since I was like 4 or 5 years old. So I've had this nickname for a
Wow,
long time.
that's amazing. How did you get into this line of work?
I was late to accept my faith of becoming a therapist. My dad's a therapist, mom's a therapist, sister's a therapist. I actually, when
Oh,
I
wow.
first moved to America, I became a stockbroker back when we were still called stockbrokers.
Yes.
And so I tried to deny the family vocation. It's definitely what I'm best at.
Pulls you in.
But yeah, by my mid 30s, I'd given up the fight and gone back to school and became a therapist. I love it.
So, what part that excites you the most when dealing with people?
Look, I feel I get to meet all of a person. When you're out in the world, like even when I was a
Yes.
stockbroker slash financial advisor or
Yeah.
did business development, again, I love people, but
Yeah.
there's always a part of the person that is hidden or on purpose. And so it's this kind of weird facade conversation. Like I always feel like conversations outside of the therapy room are polite. There's a
Mm.
certain realness missing.
Like a script,
A script,
in a way.
everybody's
Yeah.
being, yeah, like people aren't really
Yeah.
telling you how they really
Yeah.
feel. You're not telling
Yeah.
them. And the beauty
Yes.
about therapy is I get to meet all of a person.
Yeah.
And that's just amazing, right? And so, what I love is finding aliveness. And aliveness doesn't just mean happy and joyful, it could be sad, it could be angry, it could be
Just alive.
anxious. And look, I have permission to invite people to be all those parts of themselves as a therapist. But of course, at a cocktail party, I don't have permission to, hey, no, come on, tell me how you're really feeling.
Yeah.
And play with someone in reality, not in the kind of little facade that they are and I'm putting on. But by the way, a
Mm.
little analogy I came up with, therapists are like vampires. And I don't know if you're familiar with the vampire mythology, is we have to be invited in. Right?
Oh, yes.
I can't try and access
That's
who
true.
someone really is unless they invite
Yeah.
me in. But
That's
yeah,
funny.
yeah.
Yeah. And you definitely get invited in a lot then.
Look, if someone comes into my office, and I do everything
Yeah.
virtually these days, right? That is,
Okay.
they invited me to
Yes.
try and help them become more of who they are. And
So do you
that's what I
work
do.
with Do you work with entrepreneur couples?
Yeah, most of my clients still to this day are from San Francisco, Silicon Valley. So it'd be hard to say a number or percentage, but probably most of my clients work in the hotbed mecca of the entrepreneurial world, right? Funded
Yeah.
Silicon Valley companies. Yeah, I end up working with a lot of entrepreneurs and helping them in their relationships.
When working with entrepreneur couples, what are some of the challenges that they face in their relationship? And then how do you help them navigate from through those
Yeah.
challenges?
Yeah. So look, as your audience knows that are entrepreneurs, it's all consuming. It's rare to find someone that
Yes. That's where we're
they're
going with this.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then so it flies in the face. It's of what love really is. So if you think love is the
Mhm.
need to be emotionally bonded, and there's two primary needs in love, is that me being me is good enough and acceptable is one. And then the other one is that I'm a priority to you, that I'm special to you, that I matter to you. So now
Mm.
imagine one person or both, right? But let's just say one person has their entrepreneurial endeavors and they're obsessed with it. Most likely, their partner or spouse is not going to feel special or a priority. They're not
Mm.
deprioritizing their partner or spouse on purpose, but that level
Well,
of
it's,
obsession or care
yeah.
or intensity about what they're doing, one of the consequences of that is their partner or spouse is going to feel they don't matter. And then that
Mm.
partner is going to hurt, right? And then the
Mhm.
way they respond to hurting will confirm for the entrepreneur that look how hard I'm working. I'm trying so hard. This is so important. How could you not accept
N-
me? How could you be
Not understand.
disappointed in me, not understand?
Mhm.
So that couple gets in this cycle where both of them are feeling unloved in a way that really matters to them, right? Not feeling accepted, not feeling prioritized. And
Mm.
then both of them protest in a way that makes things worse and confirms
Yeah.
this negative cycle. And then so
Mm.
my job, what I do is instead of having those two stories be separate, I help them live inside that one story and how sad and tragic this is for both of them. Look how much you love each other and how important you are to each other. And it makes sense. You're both hurting. And no wonder you would both protest like this. And if I can get them to live
Mhm.
inside of that narrative, then they can have
Yeah.
a lot of empathy and compassion for each other and then connect where it actually is really sad for both of them.
Mm.
And then they can be a
Mhm.
team again and move forward as a team with the
Mhm.
reality of our situation.
So Figs, before anybody books an appointment with you and takes that step, is there anything that you can recommend or suggest when it comes to strategies that couples can do to create that healthy balance?
The first thing I would always encourage people to try and see the systemic story, not the me story or the you story. So it's always a
Mm.
system, right? And
Mm.
when you're a part of a system, it's very hard to see if you're a tree in the woods, you're not
Mhm.
in a very good you don't have a good vantage point to see and understand the pain of the woods because you're locked deep inside the woods. You need the
Yeah.
drone's eye view. So if you can
Mm.
yourself get in your drone and get out of your subjective tree in the woods perspective and fly above the entire woods and see, oh, I get what's
Bird's
happening
eye
for
view.
both of us. Yes, you need that
Mhm.
bird's eye view. I know I'm trying to use
Mhm.
modern drones for people, but yeah, but
That's true.
yeah, you need that bird's eye view that look both. If
Yeah.
everybody always makes sense, you're hurting, even though you might think you're just like doing you, but you're in protest and you're hurting, feeling unacceptable to your spouse or partner, not supported, not understood. And I guarantee you, your spouse or partner makes sense and they're worthy of a lot of empathy and care. And the way they're protesting, even if you think it's annoying or you have judgments
Mm.
about it, it actually, if you look at it logically, I guarantee you they make a lot of sense. And now, so it's just math. Let's add those two stories. You both actually make sense. So what's happening between us makes sense. And then let's turn that into an opportunity to
Mm.
actually have empathy for each other. So
Yeah.
the key first thing you could do is try to see it's a system. Now, look, I'm not optimistic that people can do that on their own, right? Because
Mm.
love and
Yeah.
bonding is so important that you're going to feel threatened.
Yes.
You're not going to behave well when you're threatened in
Mhm.
love. One of the things that I find difficult is people expect of themselves and their partners and spouses to behave very well. And it's not a realistic expectation. Now, there are limits. I think you have a right to expect that you're not going to get hit, threatened, your passport's not going to be burned, tires aren't going to be slashed. You know what I mean? But
Mm.
people are going to be reactive. Will shut down. People will like passive aggressively only make one cup of coffee and not make one for you, right? That
Mm.
stuff is going to happen. But
Mm.
yes, try and see it's a system. But and I don't mean this as an advertisement for me, but I think
Yeah.
or people like me. The most important
Mm.
thing is if you're struggling, like with your entrepreneurial partner or with your spouse or partner, I would try and get in to see a third party that is a professional at seeing the bird's eye view and empathizing with
Mhm.
both of you as soon as possible.
Fairly. Yes.
Yeah, as early as possible, right? Because it's
Mm.
amazing how quickly things can get better if two people hurting can be held by someone that is actually seeing
So
both of
true.
them as valid, logical people.
Yes. This is exactly how what we say to our students when we're working with them is to become aware of your thoughts, emotions, and behaviors without judgment, without trying to label it, figure it out. Look at it like a consultant would. It's very difficult.
Exactly.
Obviously, it takes time to practice and work on that self awareness, but it's similar because they need a professional come in to be that balance between them.
Yeah, exactly. But that's beautiful. That is a way I often describe what I do. I'm a consultant to a couple's process. And
Mm.
just like the individual, like you're saying, your individual student, they have what they need to be able to study their individual process, but
Mm.
very hard for the couple to study their
Yes.
couple's process without the bird's eye view holder. Now, the idea is
Mhm.
like the bird's eye view holder, like me, the therapist, coach, whatever it is. The idea is to do it enough times and help them have the reparative experience that eventually then they can do it themselves. But to
Mm.
expect that they could do it themselves from a starting point that they're both feeling hurt by each other, it's not realistic that they will succeed the first time. This is another thing I always trying to help people. And entrepreneurs are actually, this is one thing that makes entrepreneurs very good at couples therapy. Most entrepreneurs know nothing works the first time. And even if it did work the first time, look, we have
That's
to
a good point.
validate it. We're going to have to
Yeah.
back test it. And so the same
Mm.
what makes love and relationship work, the same interventions, the same process that makes it work is probably going to fail the first 30, 40 times. So the patience and commitment, I often compare myself to a pit bull with a locked jaw. Like I know what'll make it work, and it failing the first 10 or 20 times, whatever. It's great. Every
Mhm.
time we fail, we learn a little bit new information that we can iterate and get a little further the next time we try and get this couple to a place they have empathy and can connect with each other in the disconnection, not continue to try
Mhm.
and get out of the disconnection, because the way both
Mhm.
people try and get out of disconnection actually tragically makes things worse for both of them.
Mm. And in entrepreneurship, there's a lot of uncertainty. We don't know what's going to happen. And that may affect that sense of security and trust between the couple as well. Is
Absolutely.
there any kind of advice you can give to manage these emotions?
Yeah. Let's say your listener is an entrepreneur. What I would very fundamental point is if you're not okay, the people that love you are not okay. If you're
Hmm.
not okay, they're not okay. It's just a
Yeah.
fact. You are so
Yes.
important to them, right? Our first need is to be emotionally bonded. You are your partner or spouse's primary attachment, emotional bonding figure in the world. And if you are anxious, you are worried, they will not be okay. Now, you may think that's terribly unfair. I'm dealing with something so big in my business this week, and I don't know if we're going to get funding, or I don't know if it's going to collapse,
Yeah.
right? Now, listen, all of that
Mhm.
is valid. And the fact that you're
Yes.
going through that, it is also absolutely valid that your partner or spouse is also experiencing tremendous distress because you are that important to them, that when you're not okay, they are actually feeling terrible threat, vulnerability inside. And to expect them to somehow be able to be supportive of you while they too are going under this, like, huge distress is not realistic. That's why it's really important we get you to feel. You don't need to understand the business. You don't have to include them in what's actually logistically happening if that's your thing. Not everybody spouses talk about what's
Mm.
happening, but we need to have
Yeah.
a way that you're sharing with each other and allowing each
Mm.
other to feel the distress you're having. When
Mm.
one of you is going through a hard time, you're both going through a hard time. Always.
And that's another point there about communication, how it's a vital component in the relationship. Do
Yes.
you have any techniques, exercises that you could
Well,
recommend to create more of a open communication between them?
look, for entrepreneurs, like, this is one of the tough parts, right? Let's say a
Mhm.
generalization, like, entrepreneurs are typically good at, when scared, activating and continue to move and press forward while being scared. That's great. But
Mm.
then you try and
Yeah.
apply that exact same skill in your
Uh-huh.
relationship. I'm not going to feel my vulnerability, my fear. I'm not going to talk about it. I'm just going to press
Yeah.
forward. That's not going to work with your romantic partner.
Yeah.
That's going to lead them more distress. So look, you got to do, like, entrepreneurship teaches us all the time, right? I can't just stay in my lane. I got to learn this new skill. So you got to be
Yeah.
able to context switch. What works in your business, right, is not going to work in your relationship. You can't just press forward. You got to learn how to look. I have this urge to press forward and just get through this, like, scary place, right? And that's good in your business, perhaps. But with my partner, I got to let them know, hey, by the way, do you see the way I'm head down and I look distracted? What's actually really happening inside me is I'm scared as hell. And I want you to know that when I
Yeah.
look like I'm not available to you, I just don't know what else to do right now. That
Yeah.
will make that you not burdening them, because they already feel it because you're so important to them. You're actually
Yeah.
giving them a gift by letting them into your internal
Mm.
experience.
Mm.
Oh, that'll give them a big out breath. Thank God.
Yeah.
Because they'd rather be with you, even if what you're dealing
Yes.
with is hard, than be
Yeah.
kept on the outside.
Yeah. And sometimes it's just the type of person too that they like to keep things like business separate than their family, for example. They just don't communicate anything about business in the
Yeah,
relationship
but look,
either, right?
your body, the way your
Yeah.
shoulders are hung, the way you don't greet people when they come into the door.
Yeah.
Look, you're
It
not doing
shows.
as good a job at keeping it separate as you
Mm.
think. I guarantee you.
Yeah.
You're like, oh,
Uh,
church and state don't mix. Look,
mhm.
if you're an entrepreneur and it means something to you, your family are riding that roller coaster with you every day, or your partner or spouse.
Yeah. Like it or not.
Exactly.
Do
So
it. Yeah.
let's try and name it explicitly. One of the biggest things you can do to improve something is not actually change it, is just naming it, letting it be
Mm.
explicit.
Becoming
That
aware of it,
even just
naming it.
naming something, this is
Hmm.
actually happening. I am worried. I am not available. I am really hurting because it looks like you care more about the business than me. That seems like that would be a terrible thing. But the two
Hmm.
people were already living with that reality. They just weren't saying it explicitly. So much better to get it out and have it explicit, because it's like it takes a problem that has very little air to breathe and it's really contracted. And it's just the exact same problem now. There's a lot of space
Mm.
around it. And when we have more space around it, now there are more possibilities that it can change into something else.
Wonderful. Figs, can you share with us what you feel your innermost superpower is that got you to this point in your life?
Yeah, my innermost superpower, because I had lots of material to work with, is turning my, like, going from reactivity to vulnerability and sharing my vulnerability.
Mm.
And I got lots of wounding as a kid, emotional
Yeah.
wounding as a child,
Mm.
and had loads of ways of protecting myself and was very proud of the way I protected myself. And luckily, I was able to look at the way I protected myself, go, you know what? I think it's probably better I work less on protecting myself and be a vulnerable one, a hurt one, and share and communicate with the world the way I'm hurt. And of course, that's what I do now is
That's
I help
great.
other people do that.
Yeah. That's what I started doing as well, not just because you've been hearing a lot about sharing your vulnerability, and there's a lot of that going around, but it was just part of that phase is that I didn't want to be behind it. I wanted to let it out. But it felt,
Yeah,
it's just freeing when it's so freeing that you can actually just be yourself. You're not affected
exactly.
by what other people think of you anymore. That's like a superpower on its own. So, yeah, I agree. Great,
Thank you.
Figs. Appreciate you. Thank you so much for coming on our show today. It was wonderful talking to you. I'm sure we have helped people out there that are attending this episode today. So thanks again.
Thank you, Shahid. Good, nice to see you.
You're welcome. Audience, thank you for joining us. You can take a look at Fig's information if you need any help. Get in touch. And hopefully, what we shared today is going to help in any way possible. Thanks again for helping us grow. Appreciate you guys. Bye for now.